It all started with what I thought was a thoughtful gesture. Jenna, my wife of 10 years, had been feeling down about herself lately, mentioning how she missed her pre-kid body and wishing she had more energy. So, when her birthday rolled around, I surprised her with a gym membership to a high-end fitness center in town at a first. She was thrilled. "This is perfect, Ryan," she said, hugging me tightly. Her excitement seemed genuine, and I was glad I could help her feel good about herself again. Within a few weeks, Jenna had fallen into a routine. She went to the gym 5 mornings a week, and it quickly became her favorite part of the day. She'd come home glowing, chatting about her new workouts and how good it felt to move her body again. "It's like a whole new world," she said one night over dinner. "The classes, the people, everyone's so motivating. You should come with me sometime." I laughed, shaking my head. "I'm happy for you, but I'll stick to my runs. Gyms aren't really my thing." She smiled, shrugging. "Your loss." I didn't think much of it. After all, she seemed happier, more confident. And wasn't that what I wanted for her? For us? About a month in, she started mentioning her trainer, Marcus. At first, it was casual. "Marcus said I have great form on my squats," she'd say with a grin. "He's been helping me tweak my technique." Or, "Marcus says I should try the spin class on Saturdays. He thinks I'd crush it." I didn't mind. Marcus was just a trainer, someone doing his job and helping Jenna meet her goals. I even joked about it. "Tell Marcus not to work you too hard. I need you in one piece to help me wrangle the kids." She laughed, and that was that. But as the weeks went on, I noticed that she talked about him a lot. Too much, maybe. His name came up in nearly every conversation about the gym, and she started mentioning small details about him that seemed unnecessary. "Marcus has been a trainer for years. He used to compete in bodybuilding competitions. Isn't that cool?" Or, "Marcus says his clients keep him so busy he barely has time to date. Poor guy." It was subtle at first, but the frequency of his name planted a seed of unease in my mind. I pushed it aside, telling myself I was overthinking it. Jenna wasn't the type to cheat. She loved me, loved our kids. I trusted her. I had no reason not to. But then, one morning, I overheard something that made my stomach tighten. I was heading to the kitchen to grab a cup of coffee when I heard Jenna on the phone. Her voice low but different. It wasn't her usual cheerful tone. It was softer, almost coy. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said. "Yeah, same time. Can't wait." She laughed lightly, then hung up before I could hear anything else. I walked into the kitchen, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Who was that?" I asked casually. "Oh, just Marcus," she said, not looking up from her cup of tea. He was confirming my session for tomorrow. Something about the way she brushed it off didn't sit right with me. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to smile. "Sounds like you're keeping him busy." She grinned. "What can I say? He's a good trainer." That night, as I lay in bed next to Jenna, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The way she talked about Marcus, the way she seemed to light up when his name came up, it felt like more than just a trainer-client relationship. That I wanted to believe I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But the whisper of doubt was there, and it wasn't going away. The doubt from that morning stayed with me, nagging at the back of my mind like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. Not because I didn't trust Jenna, but because something about her behavior felt different. She began dressing up more for the gym. At first, it was small things, new leggings, a brighter workout tank. But soon, her trips to the gym involved nearly an hour of preparation. She'd spend extra time fixing her hair, even applying a touch of makeup before heading out. "Why all the effort?" I asked one morning, half joking as she adjusted her ponytail in the mirror. "Just makes me feel good," she said with a smile. "You know, a little confidence boost." It sounded innocent enough, but it still made my stomach tighten. Jenna was a naturally beautiful woman. She'd never been the type to fuss over her appearance. Now, it seemed like she was trying to impress someone. One Saturday, as I was out running errands, I decided to stop by the gym on a whim. It wasn't something I'd normally do, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what this place was like, to understand why it had become such a central part of Jenna's life. When I walked in, the first thing I noticed was how pristine everything was. Shiny equipment, brightly lit studios, rows of treadmills filled with focused gym-goers. I scanned the floor, looking for Jenna, but it didn't take long to spot her. She was in the corner by the free weights, laughing at something Marcus was saying. He stood close, too close, and the way he smiled at her sent a jolt of anger through me. Marcus was everything you'd expect in a trainer. Tall, muscular, with a confidence that bordered on cocky. He leaned in as Jenna said something, his hand brushing her shoulder. I didn't know what I expected, but seeing it in person felt like a punch to the gut. "Hey, babe," I said, walking up to her. My tone was calm, but my chest felt tight. Jenna spun around, startled. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" "Thought I'd check the place out," I said, forcing a smile. "See what all the hype's about." Marcus extended a hand, his grin practiced and smooth. "You must be Ryan. Jenna's mentioned you." I shook his hand, his grip firm but too friendly. "Yeah, and you must be Marcus. Jenna talks about you all the time." Jenna's cheeks flushed, and she laughed nervously. "He's a great trainer," she said quickly. "He's been helping me a lot." Marcus chuckled, nodding. "Your wife's got incredible potential. She works harder than most of my clients." I felt a wave of possessiveness rise in me, but I forced it down. "That's good to hear," I said, my tone even. "Nice to meet you, Marcus." After a few more polite exchanges, I left the gym, telling Jenna I'd meet her at home. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the image of them together. The way Marcus looked at her, the way she laughed at his jokes. It all felt too familiar, too comfortable. That night, as we sat on the couch watching TV, I decided to test the waters. "So, Marcus seems nice," I said casually. Jenna didn't look up from her phone. "Yeah, he's great." "Why?" "No reason," I said, shrugging. "Just curious. You spend a lot of time with him." She glanced at me, her expression neutral. "He's my trainer, Ryan. That's kind of the point." I nodded, but the unease in my chest grew stronger. Something about the way she brushed it off didn't feel right. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the red flags were becoming harder to ignore. That night, as Jenna slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My gut told me something was wrong, but I didn't have proof. Not yet. If I was going to confront her, I needed to be sure. After my visit to the gym, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Jenna's laughter, the way Marcus touched her shoulder, the way she seemed flustered when I showed up. It all gnawed at me, but I still didn't have anything concrete, just a growing suspicion that I couldn't ignore. That suspicion turned into something more tangible a few nights later. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when the soft glow of Jenna's phone caught my eye. It buzzed on the nightstand, the screen lighting up with a notification. I leaned over slightly, careful not to disturb her. The message preview read, "Marcus, can't wait for tomorrow. Same time." My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my ears. Why was he texting her late at night? And why did the message sound so personal, so intimate? I wanted to grab her phone and read the full conversation, but something stopped me. If I crossed that line, there was no going back. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the doubts that had been whispering in my mind grew louder. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. At work, my mind kept drifting back to the text. Was I overreacting? Was this just a trainer confirming a session? Or was there something more to it? The uncertainty was driving me crazy. That evening, as Jenna got ready for the gym, I decided to test the waters. She was in the bathroom, tying her hair into a sleek ponytail, when I leaned against the doorframe. "Heading to the gym again?" I asked. "Yeah," she said, her tone light. "Marcus wants me to try a new program today." I clenched my jaw but forced a smile. "You two seem to spend a lot of time together." Jenna paused, her hands stilling. She looked at me through the mirror, her expression carefully neutral. "He's my trainer, Ryan. Of course we do. Late-night texts seem a bit much for a trainer. Don't you think?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly. "He was just confirming my session," she said, her tone dismissive. "You're overthinking it." "Am I?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Because it feels like there's more to this than you're letting on." Jenna sighed, turning to face me. "Ryan, you're being ridiculous. Marcus is just a trainer. That's it." I didn't respond, my jaw tightening as she grabbed her bag and walked out the door. Her deflection hadn't eased my doubts. It had only deepened them. That night, I made a decision. If I was going to get answers, I needed to find them myself. After Jenna left, I called my best friend, Mike. He'd always been a straight shooter, the kind of guy who didn't sugarcoat things. "Hey man," I said, pacing the living room. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," Mike said. "What's up?" I hesitated, the words heavy in my mouth. "How do you know if someone's cheating on you?" There was a pause on the other end. "Jenna?" he asked, his tone cautious. "I don't know," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. Something doesn't feel right. Her trainer texts her late at night. She's spending all this time at the gym. It's not normal, Mike." Mike sighed. "Listen, man, I don't want to jump to conclusions. But if your gut's telling you something's off, it probably is. You need proof, though. Don't confront her without it." "How do I get proof?" I asked, my voice tight. "Hire someone," Mike said. "A PI, maybe. It's not cheap, but it's better than driving yourself crazy guessing." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thanks, Mike." "No problem," he said. "And Ryan, be prepared for whatever you find. Sometimes the truth hurts." That night, I stayed up late, scrolling through private investigator websites. Each click felt like a betrayal of the trust Jenna and I had built, but then I reminded myself, she's the one who broke it first. The next day, I called a private investigator named Laura. She came highly recommended and had a reputation for being thorough and discreet. Her calm, professional tone put me slightly at ease, though the entire conversation felt surreal. "Ryan," she said after I explained the situation, "this isn't uncommon. If something's happening, we'll find out. But I have to ask, are you ready for what we might uncover?" I hesitated. Was I ready? The truth felt like a double-edged sword. Knowing would give me clarity, but it might also destroy everything I thought I had. "I need to know," I said finally. "Whatever it is." We set up a meeting for the following afternoon, and as I hung up, a knot of anxiety settled in my stomach. Hiring a PI felt drastic, like a step I couldn't take back. But the late-night texts, the secret of behavior, it was too much to ignore. At our meeting, Laura asked for details. Jenna's gym schedule, Marcus's full name if I had it, and any patterns I'd noticed. I handed over the information, including screenshots of the messages I'd seen and the charges Jenna had made to our credit card for gym-related expenses. "This will take some time," Laura said as she jotted down notes. "But I'll keep you updated as we go." As I left her office, I felt a mixture of relief and dread. The investigation was in motion now, and there was no turning back. That evening, Jenna came home from the gym, her cheeks flushed and her hair slightly damp. She kissed me on the cheek as she walked past, heading straight to the shower. I watched her go, my stomach churning with a mix of anger and sadness. How long had she been lying to me, and why couldn't I bring myself to confront her outright? When she came out of the bathroom, she looked at me curiously. "You've been quiet today. Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." She nodded, seemingly satisfied, and disappeared into the bedroom. I sat on the couch, staring at the TV without really watching it. My mind was miles away, stuck in a loop of doubt and frustration. A few days later, Laura called with her first update. My hands were clammy as I answered the phone. "We've been monitoring Jenna's movements," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "So far, she's been sticking to her routine. Gym in the mornings, errands afterward. But we've noticed she spends significantly more time at the gym than her workout schedule would require." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling. "It means she's not just working out," Laura said carefully. We also observed her and Marcus having coffee together at a cafe near the gym. It was casual, but intimate. Intimate. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. We're still gathering evidence, Laura continued. I'll have more for you in a few days. I thanked her, my voice barely steady, and hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Part of me had hoped I was wrong, that I was overthinking everything. But now, the cracks in my marriage were becoming impossible to ignore. That night, as Jenna slept beside me, I scrolled through the photos Laura had sent. One showed Jenna and Marcus sitting at a small table, their heads tilted close together as they talked. Another showed Marcus leaning toward her, his hand resting on the back of her chair. The images burned into my mind, each one fueling the anger that was steadily growing inside me. This wasn't paranoia anymore. Something was happening, and I was going to find out just how deep the betrayal went. The images Laura sent haunted me. Seeing Jenna with Marcus, laughing, leaning in close, looking more like a couple than trainer and client, made my stomach churn. I tried to act normal around her, for Emily's sake and for my own sanity, but every interaction felt like walking on a tightrope. I spent the next few days consumed by Laura's updates. Each call brought another piece of the puzzle. The extended gym sessions, the coffee dates, the lingering touches between Jenna and Marcus. By the end of the week, Laura's tone had shifted from cautious to definitive. Ryan, she said during one call, we've observed behavior that suggests this is more than just a professional relationship. What kind of behavior? I asked, my voice hollow. There's a hotel, she said carefully. They've been meeting there during the day. I have video of them entering together and leaving a few hours later. My hands clenched into fists, my chest tightening as her words sank in. A hotel. There was no ambiguity left, no room for denial. Jenna wasn't just lying to me. She was betraying me in the worst way possible. Send me everything, I said, my voice hard. I need to see it. That night, after Jenna had gone to bed, I sat at my laptop and opened the file Laura had sent. The evidence was overwhelming. Photos of Jenna and Marcus entering the hotel together, their body language unmistakably intimate. Video clips of them leaving hours later, their faces relaxed and smiling. I felt a wave of nausea as I closed the laptop. This was it. The confirmation I had dreaded but couldn't avoid. My wife was cheating on me, and it wasn't just a fling. It was a relationship. The next morning, as Jenna got ready for the gym, I watched her from the kitchen. She was humming softly, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. She grabbed her bag, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "See you later, babe." I wanted to stop her, to confront her right then and there, but I held back. Not because I wasn't ready, because I was furious, but because I needed to think about how this would impact everything. Emily, our family, our future. After she left, I called Laura. "I need one last thing," I said. "A timeline. I need to know how long this has been going on." Laura agreed, and by the end of the day, she had her answer. 2 years, she said softly. It started shortly after she joined the gym. 2 years. The number hit me like a freight train. For 2 years, Jenna had been sneaking around, lying to me, and pretending everything was fine. For 2 years, I had been blind to the truth. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a thought crept into my mind that made my blood run cold. What about Emily? My love for her was unconditional, but the timing of Jenna's affair made me question everything. Could Marcus be? The thought was unbearable, but I couldn't ignore it. If Jenna had been lying about this, what else had she been hiding? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I made a plan. I would confront Jenna, and I would demand answers. About everything. The weight of the truth pressed down on me all day. 2 years. Jenna's betrayal had spanned 2 years. Nearly a fifth of our marriage. And now, the question of Emily's paternity gnawed at me, making the thought of confronting Jenna even harder. But I couldn't avoid it any longer. I needed answers, no matter how painful they might be. That evening, after Emily had gone to bed, I sat in the living room, waiting for Jenna to come home from the gym. When I heard her keys jingling in the lock, my heart raced, anger and dread swirling in my chest. "Hey," she said as she walked in, dropping her bag by the door. "What's with the serious face?" "Sit down," I said, my voice flat. Jenna froze, her smile fading. "What's going on?" "Sit down." She hesitated, then moved to the couch, her expression wary. "Ryan, you're scaring me." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "How long?" I asked, my tone sharp. "How long have you been lying to me?" Her eyes widened, and she shifted uncomfortably. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Jenna," I snapped, my voice rising. "I know about Marcus. I know about the hotel. I know everything." Her face went pale, and for a moment, she said nothing. Then her shoulders slumped, and she looked down at her hands. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she said softly. My chest tightened, anger bubbling to the surface. "So, you admit it? You've been cheating on me with your trainer for 2 years." Jenna's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "I'm so sorry, Ryan. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Didn't mean for it to go this far?" I barked, standing up and pacing the room. "Do you even hear yourself? You've been sneaking around for 2 years, lying to me, lying to Emily. And for what? For him." "It wasn't about him," Jenna said, her voice trembling. "It was about me. I felt lost, unappreciated. And he made me feel seen." "Seen," I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You destroyed our marriage because you wanted someone to see you?" Jenna sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've ruined everything. But I never stopped loving you." "Don't," I said sharply, cutting her off. "Don't you dare say you love me. Love doesn't do this. Love doesn't lie and cheat and make a fool out of someone who trusted you." The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by Jenna's quiet sobs. My mind raced with everything I wanted to say, but one question rose above the rest. A question I'd been avoiding because I was terrified of the answer. "Is Emily mine?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jenna's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face frozen in shock. "What? Is she mine?" I repeated, my voice louder now. "Tell me the truth, Jenna." She shook her head vehemently. "Of course she's yours, Ryan. I swear." "You've been lying to me for 2 years," I said coldly. "Why should I believe you now?" Her face crumpled, and she reached out toward me. "Ryan, please. Emily is yours. I would never lie about that." I stepped back, her touch feeling like a betrayal. "I'll get a paternity test," I said firmly. "And if you're lying, if she isn't mine, I swear to God, Jenna, you'll regret it." That night, I slept on the couch, my thoughts a whirlwind of anger, heartbreak, and uncertainty. Jenna's tears and apologies meant nothing to me anymore. All I cared about now was the truth, about Emily, about our family, about everything she had taken from me. The morning after the confrontation, the house was eerily quiet. Jenna avoided me, her eyes red and puffy from the night before. I avoided her too, focusing on Emily, who thankfully seemed unaware of the storm brewing around her. "Can we go to the park today, Dad?" she asked over breakfast, her face bright with excitement. "Of course, kiddo," I said, forcing a smile. "Just let me finish my coffee." Emily's smile was a small reprieve, but as I watched her chatter about the monkey bars and her plans to race me, the doubt crept back in. What if she isn't mine? After breakfast, Jenna pulled me aside in the hallway. "Ryan," she said softly, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." "I don't want to hear it," I snapped, keeping my voice low so Emily wouldn't hear. "I'm taking the test, Jenna. That's the only talk we're having." Her lip trembled, but she nodded. "I understand." Later that afternoon, while Emily played at the park, I called the clinic Laura had recommended. They offered discreet paternity testing, and they assured me the process would be straightforward. I set up an appointment for the next day, determined to get the answers I needed. When Jenna found out, she didn't argue. She simply nodded and said, "I'll do whatever you need." The following day, Jenna and I drove to the clinic together, the tension between us thick and suffocating. Neither of us spoke during the drive, and the silence felt like a chasm that couldn't be crossed at the clinic. The staff was professional and kind, but it didn't ease the knot in my stomach. Emily wasn't with us. They'd said I could use a sample collected at home, so I'd taken one the night before, my hands shaking the entire time as the technician took our samples. I couldn't look at Jenna. I couldn't bear to see the guilt on her face or the pain in her eyes. She'd done this. She'd put us here. And no amount of tears or apologies could change that. The waiting was the hardest part. The test would take a few days, but every hour felt like an eternity. I tried to stay busy, throwing myself into work and spending as much time as possible with Emily. But the thought of the results was always there, gnawing at the edges of my mind. Jenna, for her part, seemed to withdraw further into herself. She stayed out of my way, barely speaking unless it was about Emily. I could tell she was hurting, but I couldn't bring myself to care. My own pain was too overwhelming. 3 days later, the clinic called. My heart pounded as I answered, the technician's voice calm but clinical. "Mr. Ryan," she said, "your results are in. Would you like to come in to discuss them? Or should I send them electronically?" "Send them," I said, my voice tight. "I need to see them now." "Understood," she said. "I'll email them to you shortly." When the email arrived, I sat in my car in the driveway, my hands trembling as I opened it. The words blurred for a moment, my pulse roaring in my ears. Then I saw it. Probability of paternity, 0%. The world seemed to tilt around me. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening as the reality sank in. Emily, my Emily, wasn't biologically mine, and I felt like I couldn't breathe, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to ask. I thought of all the moments we'd shared, the laughter, the love. None of it was fake. But now, it was stained by Jenna's betrayal. Tears blurred my vision as I slammed my phone onto the passenger seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do something to release the anger and heartbreak that were tearing me apart. Instead, I sat there in silence, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. I sat in the car for what felt like hours, staring at the email. 0%. The number was cold, clinical, final. It cut through me like a blade, severing the bond one thought was unbreakable. My love for Emily hadn't changed. How could it? She was still my little girl, the one I'd rocked to sleep, cheered for at soccer games, and taught to ride a bike. But the foundation beneath our family had crumbled, leaving me adrift. When I finally walked inside, Jenna was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with dread. "Well?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I dropped my phone onto the table in front of her. "Read it yourself." She picked up the phone, her hands trembling. As her eyes scanned the screen, her face crumpled. "Ryan, don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "Don't you dare try to explain this." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no sympathy. My anger burned too hot. "How could you do this to me? To Emily?" I demanded. "You lied to me, Jenna. For years. You let me believe she was mine." "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I swear, Ryan, I didn't know." "Didn't know?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You've been cheating on me for 2 years. You expect me to believe you didn't even consider the possibility." She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I didn't want to believe it," she whispered. "I told myself it couldn't be true." "Well, now we know," I said coldly, my voice trembling with fury. "And you've destroyed everything." Emily came home from a friend's house that evening, oblivious to the chaos brewing beneath the surface. She ran up to me, holding a picture she had drawn. A stick-figure family of 3, smiling beneath a bright sun. "Look, Dad," she said excitedly. "It's us." My heart twisted painfully. "It's beautiful, kiddo," I said, forcing a smile as I hugged her tightly. But as I held her, I couldn't stop the thought that had haunted me since reading the results. What happens when she finds out? That night, Jenna tried to talk to me again, but I wasn't ready. I grabbed a pillow and a blanket and set up camp on the couch. She stood in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes red. "Ryan, please," she said softly. We need to figure this out. For Emily. For Emily? I snapped, turning to face her. You think you're doing this for her? You think hiding the truth and destroying her family is helping her? I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she said, her voice breaking. But it did, I said coldly. And now we have to live with it. She didn't respond, her head bowing as she turned and walked back to the bedroom. I watched her go, my chest heaving with the weight of my emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal, and beneath it all, a deep, aching love for Emily that refused to be shaken, no matter what the DNA test said. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I need to know my rights, I said, my voice tight. I don't care what the DNA says. Emily is my daughter, and I'm not losing her. The lawyer listened carefully, asking questions about the timeline and Jenna's affair. Family courts prioritize the child's best interests, he said. If you've been raising Emily as your own, you have a strong case. But Ryan, this could get messy. Messy didn't begin to cover it. My entire life was in shambles, and the only thing I cared about now was protecting Emily. Whatever it took, I would fight for her. That evening, as I tucked Emily into bed, she looked up at me with her big, trusting eyes. You'll always be my dad, right? She asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard, and I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. Of course, sweetheart, I said, kissing her forehead. I'll always be your dad, no matter what. The days after the paternity test were suffocating. The house felt like a war zone. Silent, tense, and full of unspoken pain. Jenna tried to talk to me a few times, but every conversation ended the same way, with me shutting her down. I wasn't ready to hear her apologies or excuses. My focus was on Emily and figuring out how to navigate a reality I hadn't asked for. One evening, as I sat on the couch staring blankly at the TV, Jenna sat down across from me. Her face was pale, and her hands fidgeted in her lap. Ryan, we need to talk, she said, her voice trembling. I don't want to hear it, I said coldly, not even looking at her. You can't keep shutting me out, she said, her tone growing firmer. We need to figure out what's next. I turned to face her, my anger bubbling to the surface. What's next? I snapped. What's next is that I figure out how to protect Emily from the mess you've created. Jenna's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. I know I've hurt you, but Emily needs both of us. No matter what happens between us, we have to put her first. You don't get to lecture me about putting Emily first, I said, my voice rising. You've been lying to her and to me for years. Do you even realize what you've done to her? To us? She flinched, her tears spilling over. I hate myself for what I've done, she said, her voice breaking. But I love Emily, and I love you. I want to fix this. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Fix this? There's no fixing this, Jenna. You broke our family. You broke me. And now you expect me to just forgive you. I don't expect anything, she said softly. But I want to try. For Emily. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Emily. Every decision I made now would affect her, and the thought of her getting caught in the crossfire was unbearable. That night, I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling as my thoughts spiraled. What was the right thing to do? Staying with Jenna felt impossible, but tearing our family apart would hurt Emily in ways I couldn't bear to imagine. The next morning, as I dropped Emily off at school, she looked up at me with a hesitant smile. Are you and Mom okay? She asked suddenly. Her question caught me off guard, and I forced a smile. We're fine, kiddo, I lied. Just grown-up stuff. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on me, filled with worry. I hated lying to her, but how could I explain something so complex to a 7-year-old? Later that day, I met with my lawyer again to discuss custody. I explained the situation, laying out the timeline of Jenna's affair and the results of the paternity test. The lawyer listened carefully, then leaned back in his chair. Ryan, the courts prioritize what's in the child's best interests. You've been Emily's father in every way that matters, and that carries a lot of weight. But you need to be prepared for a fight if Jenna contests custody. She won't, I said firmly. She knows what she's done. Still, the lawyer said, I recommend gathering everything, proof of your role in Emily's life, financial records, anything that demonstrates the bond you have with her. It'll strengthen your case. I nodded, my resolve hardening. Whatever it took, I would protect Emily. That evening, Jenna tried to approach me again. Ryan, she said cautiously, can we talk about Emily? About how we handle this? I looked at her, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. There's nothing to talk about, I said. She's my daughter. That's all there is to it. Jenna's lip trembled, and she nodded. You're right, she said softly. But she deserves stability. We need to figure out how to give her that. The irony of her words made my blood boil. Stability? You're the one who ripped it away from her. Jenna didn't respond, her head bowing as tears streamed down her face. I turned away, unable to look at her. That night, as I tucked Emily into bed, she wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Always. As I left her room, I made a silent promise. No matter what happened, I would never let her feel the weight of Jenna's betrayal. She was my daughter, and I would fight for her with everything I had. The days that followed were a blur of tension and silence. Every moment I spent in the same house as Jenna felt suffocating. Her presence a constant reminder of the betrayal that had torn our family apart. I threw myself into work during the day and focused on Emily in the evenings, but the weight of the situation never left me. One evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Jenna approached me in the living room. She stood in the doorway, looking hesitant, her arms crossed over her chest. We need to talk, she said softly. I didn't even look up. I'm not interested in talking to you. Ryan, please, she said, her voice trembling. We can't keep living like this. It's not good for Emily. That caught my attention. I set down the remote and turned to face her, my anger bubbling to the surface. You don't get to lecture me about what's good for Emily, I snapped. You're the one who put us in this position. I know, she said, tears brimming in her eyes. I know I'm the one who ruined everything, but we need to figure out how to move forward for her. Move forward? I laughed bitterly. What does that even look like, Jenna? Do you think I can just forget what you've done? That we can go back to normal? No, she said, shaking her head. I don't expect that, but we need to start somewhere. Emily deserves that. Her words hit me like a gut punch, not because they were wrong but because they were right. Emily deserved better than this toxic stalemate. But how could I move forward when every time I looked at Jenna, I saw the betrayal? The next day, I met with my lawyer again to finalize my custody case. I brought him everything he'd asked for. Financial records, photos of Emily and me from over the years, and even letters from her teachers describing my involvement in her education. This is strong, Ryan, my lawyer said as he reviewed the documents. It paints a clear picture of your role as Emily's father. But I need to ask, have you considered how you want to handle the paternity issue if it comes up in court? I hesitated, the question hitting a nerve. What do you mean? If Jenna's lawyer raises the fact that Emily isn't biologically yours, it could complicate things. Do you want to address it head-on or keep it out of the proceedings? She's my daughter, I said firmly. That's all that matters. My lawyer nodded. Good. Then we'll focus on that. That evening, as I played a board game with Emily, she looked up at me suddenly. Dad, are you mad at Mom? The question caught me off guard, and I forced a smile. Why do you ask, kiddo? You don't talk to her anymore, she said. And you always look sad. I sighed, setting down the game piece in my hand. Sometimes grown-ups go through hard things, I said gently. But it doesn't mean we don't love you. That will never change. She frowned, her big eyes searching my face. I just want everyone to be happy. My chest tightened, and I reached out to ruffle her hair. Me too, Eminencia. Me too. That night, Jenna tried to talk to me again, but I shut her down. I wasn't ready to face her yet. Not after everything she had done. But as I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, I realized that ignoring her wasn't going to solve anything. If we were going to move forward, for Emily's sake, we needed to have a real conversation. And as much as I hated the thought, I knew it was time to make a decision about what came next. The next morning, I woke with a heavy sense of determination. The tension in the house wasn't just affecting me. It was affecting Emily. She didn't deserve to grow up in an environment filled with unspoken anger and grief. Jenna was right about one thing. We needed to figure out how to move forward, even if it felt impossible. That evening, after Emily went to bed, I found Jenna in the kitchen. She was cleaning up from dinner, her movements slow and deliberate. She looked up when I entered, her face wary. "Can we talk?" I said, keeping my tone neutral. She set down the dish she was washing, nodding. "Of course." We sat across from each other at the table, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. For a moment I didn't know where to start. Then I took a deep breath and said, "This can't go on, Jenna. The way we're living. It's not good for Emily, and it's not good for us." "I know," she said softly, her hands twisting in her lap. "But what do we do, Ryan? How do we fix this?" I shook my head, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "We can't fix it. What you've done. There's no coming back from that." Her lip trembled, and tears filled her eyes. "I know I've hurt you," she whispered, "and I know I've destroyed your trust. But I love you, Ryan. I love our family. I don't want to lose that." "You already lost it," I said, my voice breaking. "The moment you decided to cheat on me, to lie to me for 2 years. You lost it." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. I sat there, my chest tight, unsure of how to feel. I didn't want to hurt her, but the anger and betrayal were too overwhelming to ignore. "I'm filing for separation," I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "We need to live apart, Jenna. For Emily's sake." Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face filled with panic. "Ryan, please," she begged. "Don't do this. Don't take her away from me." "I'm not taking her away," I said firmly. "We'll share custody. But I can't stay in this house with you. Not anymore." The next day, I met with my lawyer to begin the process. He walked me through the legal steps, outlining what separation would look like and how custody would be divided. It was overwhelming, but it also felt like the first step toward reclaiming control over my life. When I told Emily that I'd be moving to a new place, her face fell. "Why?" she asked, her voice small. "Sometimes grown-ups need a little space to figure things out," I said gently. "But you'll still see me all the time, Em. Nothing will change that." She nodded slowly, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. It broke my heart, but I knew this was the right decision. Over the next few weeks, I found a small apartment nearby and began moving my things. The process was both cathartic and painful. As I packed up my life, I couldn't help but think of all the memories Jenna and I had shared in the house. The laughter, the love, the moments that now felt tainted. Jenna helped pack some of my things, her face a mixture of guilt and sorrow. She tried to talk to me a few times, but I kept my responses brief. I wasn't ready to forgive her. I wasn't sure I ever would be. The first night in my new apartment was quiet and lonely. I sat on the couch, staring at the boxes that surrounded me, and wondered how my life had come to this. But as painful as it was, I felt a small flicker of hope. This was a new beginning. Not the one I wanted, but the one I needed. The first few weeks in my new apartment were surreal. The silence was deafening, the emptiness palpable. Without Emily's laughter echoing through the halls or the constant hum of family life, the loneliness hit me harder than I expected. But there was also relief, a sense of freedom from the suffocating tension that had consumed the house. I focused on creating a home for Emily. Her room became my priority. I let her pick out new bedding and decorations, and we spent an entire afternoon assembling a bookshelf for her growing collection of chapter books. When it was done, she grinned proudly. "It's perfect," she said, hugging me tightly. Her words were a balm to my fractured heart. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was doing something right. Meanwhile, Jenna and I navigated the logistics of separation. The custody schedule was straightforward. Emily spent weekdays with Jenna and weekends with me. The arrangement worked, but it didn't make things any easier. Each time I dropped Emily off at the house, I was hit with a wave of emotions. Anger, sadness, and a deep sense of loss. Jenna tried to keep things civil, but every interaction felt strained. She looked tired, her face pale and drawn, and I could see the guilt weighing on her. "How's Emily doing?" she asked one evening as I handed over her backpack. "She's fine," I said shortly, avoiding her gaze. Jenna hesitated, then said, "Ryan, thank you for keeping things steady for her." Her words stung, but I nodded and left without replying. I wasn't ready to accept her gratitude. Not when she was the one who had upended our lives. One Friday, as Emily and I ate dinner at the kitchen table, she looked up at me with a curious expression. "Do you think you'll ever move back home, Dad?" Her question caught me off guard, and I set down my fork. "Why do you ask, kiddo?" "I don't know," she said, shrugging. "I just miss us all being together." The ache in her voice was like a knife to my chest. I leaned forward, resting my hand on hers. "I know it's hard," I said gently, "but some things can't go back to the way they were. That doesn't mean I love you any less." She nodded, though I could see the sadness lingering in her eyes. "I just want everyone to be happy." "So do I, I said softly. "So do I." As time went on, I began to adjust to the new normal. I threw myself into work and spent as much time as possible with Emily on the weekends. We went hiking, baked cookies, and even started a new tradition of Saturday morning pancakes. The routines helped, giving me a sense of purpose amid the chaos. But the pain of Jenna's betrayal lingered. Every now and then, I found myself replaying old memories, questioning what was real and what was a lie. It was exhausting, and I knew I couldn't keep carrying it alone. One evening, after putting Emily to bed, I sat down and opened my laptop. I searched for local support groups, hoping to find others who had been through similar situations. To my surprise, there were dozens of options. Places where people shared their stories, their struggles, and their paths to healing. I signed up for a meeting the following week, unsure of what to expect but knowing I needed to take that step. For Emily's sake, and for my own, I had to find a way to let go of the anger and start rebuilding my life. The night of the support group meeting, I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, debating whether to go in. My nerves were shot. I wasn't used to opening up about my feelings, especially not to strangers. But sitting in that car, staring at the unassuming building, I realized how much I needed this. I couldn't keep carrying the weight of Jenna's betrayal alone. I finally stepped out of the car, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The room was modest, with a circle of chairs and a pot of coffee brewing in the corner. A few people were already seated, their faces a mix of warmth and weariness. A woman with kind eyes and a clipboard introduced herself as Karen, the facilitator. "Welcome," she said, smiling. "We're glad you're here." I nodded, sitting in an empty chair and clasping my hands tightly in my lap. Over the next hour, I listened as people shared their stories. Tales of heartbreak, betrayal, and the slow, painful process of moving forward. It was raw and honest, and I found myself nodding along, their words resonating deeply. When it was my turn, I hesitated. "Hi, I'm Ryan," I began, my voice shaky. "This is my first time doing anything like this." "Take your time," Karen said gently. I exhaled and started talking. About Jenna, the affair, the paternity test. About Emily, and how she was the only thing keeping me grounded. The words spilled out faster than I expected, and by the time I finished, I felt lighter somehow, as if sharing my story had taken some of the burden off my shoulders. "Thanks for sharing, Ryan," Karen said. "You're not alone in this. We're here for you." When I left the meeting, I felt a strange mix of emotions. The pain was still there, but so was a sense of connection, a reminder that I wasn't the only one navigating this kind of heartbreak. I decided to go back the following week and the week after that. Each time, it got a little easier to open up. Meanwhile, life with Emily continued to bring me moments of joy. One Saturday, as we worked on a puzzle together, she looked up at me with a smile. "You seem happier, Dad." she said that I smiled back, ruffling her hair. I'm trying, kiddo. She nodded, her expression serious. I like it when you're happy. Her words stayed with me long after she went to bed. I realized then that moving forward wasn't just about healing myself. It was about being the best father I could be for Emily. She deserved a dad who was present, who could give her the stability and love she needed. Even in the midst of chaos. One evening, Jenna called me after Emily had gone to bed. Her voice was tentative, almost apologetic. Ryan, I just wanted to check in. How's Emily doing? She's fine, I said, keeping my tone neutral. That's good, she said softly. And, how are you? The question caught me off guard. Why do you care? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Because I still care about you, she said, her voice breaking. I know I've lost the right to say that, but it's true. I didn't respond right away, unsure of how to handle the emotion in her voice. I'm doing what I can, I said finally. For Emily. That's all I want, Jenna said. For her to be okay. When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time, staring out the window. Her words didn't change anything, they couldn't, but they reminded me that healing wasn't just about cutting ties. It was about learning to live with the past and finding a way to move forward, one step at a time. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, life began to feel manageable again. Emily adjusted to the new routine, splitting her time between Jenna and me without complaint. She still asked questions now and then, innocent ones that hinted at her longing for the family we once were, but I did my best to reassure her that she was loved, no matter what. Meanwhile, the support group became a regular part of my life. Each session brought new insights, moments of clarity, and, sometimes, even laughter. I started to see that I wasn't alone in my struggle, and the shared stories reminded me that healing was possible. One evening, after I dropped Emily off at Jenna's, I decided to take a walk in the park near my apartment. The crisp evening air felt good, clearing my head as I strolled along the tree-lined paths. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace, fragile, but real. As I sat on a bench, watching the sun set behind the hills, I thought about Jenna, about what we had been, what we had lost, and what we could never be again. The anger that had consumed me for so long wasn't as sharp anymore. It was still there, but it had softened, replaced by a quiet acceptance. The next time I saw Jenna, I decided to tell her. It was a Sunday evening, and I was picking Emily up from her house. As Emily grabbed her things, Jenna lingered in the doorway, her face cautious. Can we talk for a second? I asked. She nodded, stepping outside with me. We stood on the porch, the cool breeze ruffling her hair. What's on your mind? She asked softly. I took a deep breath. I just wanted to say, I'm not angry anymore. Her eyes widened slightly, and she blinked, as if unsure she'd heard me correctly. You're not. No, I said, my voice steady. Don't get me wrong. I'm still hurt. What you did. It's something I'll carry for the rest of my life. But I've realized that holding on to the anger isn't helping anyone. Least of all, Emily. Jenna's lip trembled, and she looked away, tears brimming in her eyes. Ryan, I don't need another apology, I said, cutting her off gently. What's done is done. All I care about now is making sure Emily has the best life we can give her. That's all that matters. She nodded, her tears spilling over. Thank you, she whispered, for everything you're doing for her, for being a good dad. I'm just doing what she deserves, I said simply. She's the only thing that matters now. That night, as I tucked Emily into bed, she looked up at me with a sleepy smile. I love you, Dad, she murmured. I love you too, Em, I said, kissing her forehead. More than anything. As I sat by her bedside, watching her drift off to sleep, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't known in months. The pain of Jenna's betrayal would always be a part of my story, but it didn't define me. It didn't define Emily. And it didn't define the life we were building together. A year after my world had fallen apart, life looked very different. The pain of Jenna's betrayal hadn't disappeared, but it no longer consumed me. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, carving out a new reality for myself and Emily. A reality that, while not perfect, was ours. Emily thrived in her new routine. Her laughter filled my apartment on weekends, and her curiosity and creativity never ceased to amaze me. We had created our own traditions: Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday evening movie marathons, and bike rides through the park. She made my little apartment feel like home, and in her presence, I found hope. One Saturday, as we sat at the kitchen table painting rocks for her school project, she looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think you'll ever get married again, Dad?" The question caught me off guard, and I set down my paintbrush. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged, dipping her brush into a bright yellow paint. "I just want you to be happy." Her words hit me square in the chest, and I smiled, reaching out to ruffle her hair. "I am happy, Em. I've got you, haven't I?" She grinned, her focus shifting back to her project. "Yeah, I guess you do." Jenna and I remained civil. Co-parenting wasn't always easy, but we had found a rhythm that worked. She respected my boundaries, and I respected her role as Emily's mother. We weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. It was enough. One afternoon, while we exchanged small talk during a custody handoff, Jenna said something that stuck with me. "You're doing a great job with her," she said, her tone genuine. "She's lucky to have you." I nodded, unsure how to respond. "She's the best thing in my life." Jenna smiled faintly. "Mine too." For a moment, I saw the woman I had once loved, the partner I had built a life with. But the moment passed quickly, and we parted ways with little more than a nod. It was better that way. The wounds between us were too deep to fully heal, but at least we had learned to coexist for Emily's sake. As the months turned into years, I found myself looking forward rather than back. The memories of what Jenna had done no longer defined me, and the anger that had once consumed me had faded into something softer. Acceptance. One evening, as Emily and I sat on the couch watching a nature documentary, she leaned against me and said, "I like it here, Dad. Feels like home." Her words brought a lump to my throat, and I wrapped an arm around her. "It is home, Em," I said, "and it always will be." Life hadn't turned out the way I had planned, but in that moment, I realized it didn't matter. I had Emily and she had me. Together, we had built something strong, something unshakable. It wasn't the life I had envisioned, but it was ours, and that was enough.